The phone rang at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday morning that I'll never forget. I was sitting in my home office, coffee still steaming, reviewing case files when an unknown number appeared on my screen. Something told me to answer it, a decision that would lead me down one of the most twisted rabbit holes of my legal career. "Is this Mr. Johnson?" The voice was cold, professional, intimidating. The kind of voice that's been trained to make people uncomfortable. "This is Attorney Johnson, yes. Who's calling?" "This is Marcus Webb from National Recovery Solutions. We have a serious matter to discuss regarding an outstanding debt of $97,842.33 that you owe to Meridian Financial Services." I almost laughed. Almost. But something in his tone made me pause. In my 15 years as a debt collection defense attorney, I'd heard every scam, every trick, every illegal tactic these companies used. But this felt different. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake. I don't have any debts with Meridian Financial Services." "Sir, according to our records, you signed a loan agreement on March 15, 2019, for $65,000. With interest and penalties, the amount now stands at $97,842.33. We've been trying to reach you for months." Here's the thing about being a lawyer who specializes in fighting debt collectors: you develop a sixth sense for their tactics. But Marcus Webb wasn't following the usual script. He wasn't threatening my credit score or making vague legal threats. He was calm, methodical, and disturbingly specific. "I'm going to need you to provide validation of this debt," I said, slipping into my professional voice. "Under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, you're required to." "Mr. Johnson," he interrupted, "we're well aware of your profession. That's exactly why we're handling this matter personally. The documentation will be sent to your office address at 1247 Oak Street, Suite 200, within 24 hours. My blood ran cold. He had my office address. Not just the street, but the suite number. This wasn't some random robocall or phishing attempt. Someone had done their homework. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "we'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss payment arrangements. Given your legal background, I'm sure you understand the serious consequences of ignoring a legitimate debt." "This conversation is over," I said. "Any further communication needs to be in writing." "Of course, counselor. We'll be in touch." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. In all my years of practice, I'd never been on the receiving end of a collection call. It was like a hunter suddenly finding himself in the crosshairs. I immediately pulled my credit reports. Clean. No inquiries from Meridian Financial Services. No record of any loan in 2019. Nothing. But the knot in my stomach told me this was just the beginning. By 10 a.m., I was deep in research mode. Meridian Financial Services existed, a small lending company based in Delaware with a spotty Better Business Bureau record. National Recovery Solutions was their collection arm, run by the same parent company. Everything looked legitimate on the surface, but something felt wrong. My assistant, Sarah, knocked on my door around lunchtime. "Mr. Johnson? There's a courier here with a package for you. Says it's urgent." The package was thick, professional, and bore the letterhead of National Recovery Solutions. Inside was a loan agreement, signed in what looked like my handwriting, for exactly $65,000. The signature was perfect. Too perfect. But it was the attached documents that made my hands shake. Bank statements showing the loan proceeds deposited into an account with my name. Payment schedules showing missed payments. Default notices sent to addresses where I'd never lived. It was a complete financial history of a debt that had never existed, crafted with the precision of a master forger. But here's what Marcus Webb and his team didn't know: they just made the biggest mistake of their professional lives. They'd targeted a lawyer who'd spent his entire career studying their tactics, learning their weaknesses, and building a reputation for taking down fraudulent debt collectors. As I sat there, staring at the fabricated documents, I realized this wasn't just about $100,000. This was about something much bigger, much more dangerous. And tomorrow, I would start building the case that would bring down their entire operation. What they didn't know was that the hunter was about to become the hunted. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I called in sick. Not because I was ill, but because I needed uninterrupted time to investigate what was clearly the most sophisticated debt collection scam I'd ever encountered. I started with the basics. The loan agreement they'd sent was dated March 15, 2019. I pulled out my calendar from that year and smiled grimly. March 15, 2019, was a Friday. I remembered that day clearly because it was my daughter Emma's 16th birthday, and I'd taken the entire day off to spend with her. We'd gone to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get her learner's permit, then out for dinner at her favorite restaurant. I had photos. I had receipts. I had witnesses. There was no way I could have been signing loan documents that day. But whoever was behind this had done their research. They knew I'd refinanced my house in early 2019, so the timing wasn't completely random. They knew my financial situation was solid enough to qualify for a $65,000 loan. They'd even forged bank statements from my actual bank, First National, with account numbers that were only one digit off from my real accounts. This level of detail required inside information. I spent the morning creating a timeline, cross-referencing every document they'd provided with my actual financial records. The fake bank account showed deposits and withdrawals that painted the picture of someone living beyond their means, expensive dinners, luxury purchases, cash withdrawals. It was like reading a story about a completely different person who happened to have my name. Around noon, my phone rang again. Marcus Webb. Mr. Johnson, I trust you've had time to review the documentation we provided? I've reviewed it thoroughly, I said. And I have to say, it's impressive. Whoever created these forgeries is quite talented. There was a pause. Mr. Johnson, I'm disappointed in your response. We had hoped that someone with your legal background would approach this matter more professionally. Oh, I'm being very professional, Marcus. In fact, I'm so impressed with the quality of your work that I've decided to conduct a thorough investigation into your entire operation. Another pause, longer this time. That would be inadvisable, counselor. The debt is legitimate, and we have every legal right to collect it. Fighting this will only increase your costs. Here's what I find fascinating, I continued, settling back in my chair. The loan agreement you sent me was supposedly signed on March 15, 2019. But I have photographs, receipts, and witness statements proving I was with my daughter all day, celebrating her 16th birthday and getting her learner's permit. Would you like me to share those with you? Silence. Furthermore, I pressed on, the bank statements you provided show deposits into account number 4782-1156-9834. My actual account number at First National is 4782-1156-9833. One digit off. Now, that's either an incredible coincidence, or someone with access to internal bank information made a very small, very telling mistake. Mr. Johnson, Marcus's voice had lost its professional calm. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Let me review your file and get back to you. Take all the time you need, Marcus. I'll be here. After he hung up, I sat back and considered my next move. This wasn't just a simple scam, it was identity theft on a massive scale, involving forged documents, fake bank records, and insider information. The question was, how many other people were they targeting? I decided to call my friend Detective Riley at the Financial Crimes Unit. We'd worked together on several cases over the years, and I trusted her instincts. Jim. Riley's voice was surprised. Don't tell me you're in trouble. Actually, I think I might be. But not the kind of trouble you're thinking. I explained the situation, sending her copies of all the documents via secure email. Jesus, Jim. This is sophisticated. Like, federal crime sophisticated. How did they get bank formatting that accurate? That's what I'm wondering. Someone either hacked First National systems, or someone on the inside is feeding them information, Riley finished. Jim, if what you're telling me is true, you might have stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple debt collection scam. That evening, I did something else I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. Maria Santos had worked with me on several complex cases, and her background in financial fraud made her perfect for this situation. I need you to find out everything you can about National Recovery Solutions and Meridian Financial Services, I told her over dinner. But be careful. These people have access to information they shouldn't have. How sophisticated are we talking? Maria asked. Sophisticated enough to forge bank statements that are 99% accurate, and to know personal details about my life that aren't in any public records. Maria whistled low. Jim, you might want to consider that this isn't random. What if someone specifically targeted you because of your profession? What if this whole thing is designed to discredit you or destroy your practice? The thought had occurred to me, but hearing it out loud made it real. Someone had spent months, maybe years, building a fake financial identity for me. The question was why. As I drove home that night, I noticed a black sedan in my rearview mirror. It had been behind me since I left the restaurant, maintaining the same distance, matching my speed exactly. When I turned into my neighborhood, it continued straight. Maybe I was being paranoid. Or maybe the game had just gotten a lot more dangerous. Maria Santos called me at 6 a.m. the next morning, which meant she'd been up all night working. In my experience, that was either very good news or very bad news. Jim, we need to meet. Not at your office, not at your house. Somewhere public but private. How about the coffee shop on 5th Street, the one with the back booths? That bad? I asked. Worse than bad. This thing goes deep, and I mean federal investigation deep. An hour later, I was sitting across from Maria in a dimly lit corner booth, watching her spread documents across the table like a dealer laying out cards. National Recovery Solutions is a shell company, she began without preamble. Incorporated in Delaware 6 months ago, but the parent company, Meridian Financial Services, has ties to at least 12 other collection agencies across the country. How many other victims are we talking about? That's where it gets interesting. I found 17 similar cases in the past year, all targeting professionals in the legal and financial sectors. Lawyers, accountants, financial advisors. People who would know how to fight back if they were being scammed. I felt a chill run down my spine. They're specifically targeting people who should know better? It gets worse. Maria pulled out another file. Remember that bank account number that was 1 digit off from yours? I tracked it down. The account actually exists, and it's been receiving deposits for the past 8 months. Someone's been building your fake financial history in real time. Who has access to First National's internal systems? I asked, though I was starting to suspect the answer. That's where your friend Detective Riley comes in. She ran a quiet inquiry for me. 3 months ago, First National reported a minor data breach, so minor that they handled it internally without reporting it to federal authorities. The breach exposed account numbers and transaction histories for approximately 2,000 customers. Including mine. Including yours. But here's the kicker, the breach was reported by an employee named David Chen, a systems administrator who supposedly discovered it during routine maintenance. Maria slid a photograph across the table. It showed a young Asian man in a bank employee ID photo, smiling confidently at the camera. David Chen doesn't exist, she said quietly. The social security number belongs to a man who died in Ohio in 2015. The address on his employment application is a vacant lot. Someone planted him inside First National specifically to gain access to customer data. I stared at the photo, trying to process the implications. This isn't a scam. It's an organized operation. It's worse than that, Jim. I think someone's using these fake debts to launder money. Think about it, they create false loan histories, then demand payment on non-existent debts. The victims pay up to avoid legal hassles, and suddenly dirty money becomes legitimate debt collection proceeds. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number, Stop digging or face the consequences. This is your only warning. I showed the message to Maria, who immediately pulled out her own phone and started taking pictures of everything on the table. We're going to the FBI, she said. Today. Wait. I grabbed her arm. If we go to the feds now, we'll lose control of the investigation. They'll shut us out, and whoever's behind this will disappear into the wind. I want these people, Maria. All of them. Jim, these people have been inside your bank. They might have access to your emails, your phone records, everything. This isn't about winning a case anymore. This is about your safety. She was right, but I'd built my career on being the lawyer who didn't back down. Give me 48 hours. Let me try one more approach. That afternoon, I did something that went against every instinct I had as a defense attorney. I called Marcus Webb back. Mr. Webb, this is Jim Johnson. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I'd like to discuss a settlement. The surprise in his voice was unmistakable. Mr. Johnson, I'm pleased to hear you're approaching this more reasonably. What did you have in mind? I'm willing to settle for $50,000, paid in full within 30 days, in exchange for a written agreement that this debt is satisfied in full and removed from all records. That's a very reasonable, Mr. Johnson. I think we can work with that. However, we would need to meet in person to finalize the paperwork. Of course. When and where? Tomorrow, 2 p.m. There's a business center at the Marriott downtown, Conference Room B. Just you, no other attorneys, no recording devices. I'll be there. After I hung up, I immediately called Detective Riley. I need surveillance tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the downtown Marriott. And Riley, bring backup. Lots of backup. Jim, what the hell are you planning? I'm going to walk into their trap, I said. But this time, I'm going to be ready for them. That night, I sat in my home office, staring at the forged loan documents and thinking about the 16 other professionals who'd been targeted. How many of them had simply paid up to avoid the hassle? How many had been destroyed by false accusations and fabricated debts? Tomorrow, I would find out who was behind this operation. And tomorrow, the hunted would become the hunter. But as I prepared for bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something much more dangerous than a simple debt collection scam. The text message kept echoing in my mind, "This is your only warning." What I didn't know was that Marcus Webb and his team had no intention of negotiating tomorrow. They had something else entirely planned for me. The Marriott downtown was bustling with typical Wednesday afternoon activity. Business travelers checking in, conference attendees networking in the lobby, tourists studying maps and brochures. Perfect cover for what was about to go down. I arrived at 1:45 p.m., wearing a wire provided by Detective Riley and carrying a briefcase containing fake documents that would look legitimate enough to fool Marcus Webb's team. The plan was simple. Get them to admit to the fraud on tape, then let Riley and her team move in for the arrests. Conference Room B was on the second floor, accessed by a hallway that had convenient sightlines for surveillance. I could see Riley's team positioning themselves as hotel guests and staff members. Everything was going according to plan. Marcus Webb was already waiting when I entered the conference room. He was exactly what I'd expected, mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of predatory smile that debt collectors perfect over years of intimidating vulnerable people. But he wasn't alone. Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming. I'd like you to meet my associate, Sarah Kim, and our legal counsel, Robert Hayes. Sarah Kim was young, Asian, professionally dressed, and held herself with the confidence of someone who knew she was the smartest person in the room. Robert Hayes was older, distinguished, with the bearing of a federal prosecutor or corporate attorney. Something felt wrong. This wasn't the setup for a simple debt collection settlement. This felt like an ambush. "Gentlemen, lady," I nodded, setting my briefcase on the conference table. "I assume you have the settlement agreement prepared?" "Actually, Mr. Johnson," Robert Hayes spoke for the first time, "we need to discuss a few additional matters before we can proceed with any settlement." He opened a folder and spread photographs across the table. They were surveillance photos of me, leaving my office, having dinner with Maria Santos, meeting with Detective Riley at the coffee shop. Someone had been following me for days. You've been quite busy, Mr. Johnson. Meeting with private investigators, contacting law enforcement, asking a lot of questions about our business operations. My blood ran cold. They knew about the investigation. Somehow, they'd been monitoring my every move. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, though my voice sounded unconvincing even to me. Sarah Kim leaned forward, her smile sharp as a blade. Mr. Johnson, we know exactly what you've been doing. We know about Detective Riley, we know about Maria Santos, and we know about your plans for today. She gestured toward a small device on the table that I hadn't noticed before. That's a signal jammer, by the way. Your wire stopped transmitting the moment you entered this room. The trap wasn't for them. It was for me. You see, Marcus Webb continued conversationally, we had hoped you would simply pay the debt and move on with your life. That would have been the smart play. But you couldn't leave well enough alone. The debt is fabricated, I said, trying to maintain some semblance of control. You know it, I know it, and now the FBI will know it. Robert Hayes laughed. The FBI? Mr. Johnson, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Assistant Director Robert Hayes, Financial Crimes Division, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The room seemed to spin around me. That's impossible. Is it? He pulled out his badge and credentials. They looked real. They felt real. Tell me, Mr. Johnson, what did you think would happen when you started investigating a federal operation? Sarah Kim opened her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a detailed dossier. My financial records, my case history, my personal information, everything about my life laid out in government database format. You've been selected for a very specific purpose, she continued. Over the past 6 months, we've been building cases against several money laundering operations that use fake debt collection as a cover. We needed someone with the right background, the right instincts, and the right motivation to help us gather evidence. You're saying this whole thing was a federal sting operation? I asked, my mind reeling. Not exactly, Marcus Webb said. The debt collection scam is real. The forged documents are real. The stolen bank data is real. What's not real is that we're the ones running it. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. 3 months ago, we arrested David Chen, the fake employee who infiltrated First National. Under interrogation, he gave up the entire operation. Names, locations, methods, everything. So why the charade? Why put me through all this? Assistant Director Hayes leaned back in his chair. Because we needed you to develop the case exactly as you did. We needed your investigation, your timeline, your evidence gathering. We needed you to make contact with Maria Santos and have her develop the connections between the shell companies. And we needed them to think they were still running the operation, Sarah Kim added. The people you've been investigating, the real criminals, they think they're still in control. They think Marcus Webb is their employee, that National Recovery Solutions is their company. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but I still felt like I was missing something crucial. So what happens now? Now, Assistant Director Hayes said, we finish the operation. Tonight, the real operators are meeting at a warehouse in South District to divide up their latest proceeds. Money collected from 17 professionals just like you, except most of them actually paid the fake debts. We need you to be there, Marcus Webb said. They think you're bringing them $50,000 in settlement money. What you'll actually be bringing them is a briefcase full of marked bills and enough surveillance equipment to put them away for life. And if I refuse? Sarah Kim's smile returned. Then we arrest you for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of a federal investigation. We have months of evidence showing your involvement in this operation, Mr. Johnson. Evidence that we carefully constructed to make you look guilty. I realized with growing horror that I'd been played from the very beginning. Every move I'd made, every decision, every investigation, It had all been orchestrated by the FBI to serve their purposes. However, Assistant Director Hayes continued, if you cooperate fully with tonight's operation, all charges will be dropped, and you'll be free to return to your normal life. Plus, you'll have the satisfaction of knowing you helped take down a major criminal organization. I looked around the room at the three faces staring at me. Federal agents who had manipulated me, lied to me, and constructed an elaborate fiction to use me as an unwitting asset. What choice do I have? I asked. None, Sarah Kim said simply. But look at it this way, tonight, you get to be the hero. Tonight, you get to bring down the people who have been destroying lives with fake debts and forged documents. As I left the Marriott that afternoon, my head spinning with the revelations of the past hour, I realized that tomorrow's story was going to be very different from the one I'd been planning to tell. But there was still one more twist waiting for me. One final surprise that would change everything I thought I knew about this case. The warehouse in South District looked exactly like what you'd expect from a criminal meeting place. Dim lighting, concrete floors, and enough shadows to hide an army of federal agents. Which, as it turned out, was exactly what was hiding there. I arrived at 11 p.m. sharp, carrying a briefcase containing $50,000 in marked bills and enough recording equipment to document a small war. The FBI had wired me again, this time with equipment that couldn't be jammed, and I had clear instructions. Get them talking, get them to admit to their crimes, and then get out safely. The main floor of the warehouse had been set up like a makeshift office, with folding tables, computers, and filing cabinets full of what I assumed were forged documents and victim profiles. It was more sophisticated than I'd expected, and somehow more chilling. This wasn't amateur hour fraud, this was an industrial-scale operation. 3 people were waiting for me, a heavy-set man in his 50s who introduced himself as Tommy Marconi, a sharp-faced woman named Elena Rodriguez, and a younger man who stayed in the shadows and never gave his name. Mr. Johnson. Tommy Marconi's voice was rough, gravelly, with just a hint of an East Coast accent. We appreciate you being reasonable about this whole situation. I just want this to be over, I said, setting the briefcase on the nearest table. 50,000, as agreed. Now I want the original loan documents destroyed and all records of this debt expunged. Elena Rodriguez laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, Mr. Johnson. You still don't understand what's really happening here, do you? Something in her tone made my blood run cold. This wasn't going according to the script the FBI had given me. The debt collection, she continued. The forged documents. The fake bank accounts. That's just the tip of the iceberg. We've been running this operation for 3 years, and we've collected over $12 million from people just like you. Tommy Marconi opened my briefcase and examined the bills with practiced efficiency. Beautiful work, he said. Federal agents always use such crisp, new bills. Very professional. My heart stopped. What did you say? Oh, come on, Mr. Johnson. You don't really think we fell for this charade, do you? Elena pulled out a chair and sat down casually, as if we were having coffee instead of conducting a federal sting operation. We've known about the FBI investigation for months. The young man in the shadows finally stepped forward, and I felt the world shift beneath my feet. It was David Chen, the systems administrator who was supposed to have been arrested months ago. Hello, Mr. Johnson, he said with a slight smile. I believe we have some mutual friends at the bureau. That's impossible, I stammered. The FBI said you were arrested. They said you gave up the whole operation. The FBI says a lot of things, Elena Rodriguez replied. Most of them are lies. Tommy Marconi gestured for me to sit down, and something in his manner suggested it wasn't really a request. Let me tell you a story, Mr. Johnson. A story about corruption, about federal agents who decided they were tired of working for government salaries, and about a debt collection scam that was too profitable to shut down. You see, David Chen continued, when the real FBI stumbled onto our operation, we made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Why arrest us and end the money flow when they could become silent partners instead? Elena pulled out a tablet and showed me a series of bank account statements. Assistant Director Robert Hayes has made over $2 million in the past year. Detective Riley, your friend Riley, she's made about $800,000. Even your friend Marcus Webb, who you thought was working for us but was actually FBI, he's been taking his cut. The room was spinning. Everything I thought I knew, everyone I thought I could trust, it was all a lie. The beautiful part, Tommy Marconi said, is that we've been using federal resources to run our operation. FBI databases, federal surveillance equipment, even federal agents to intimidate victims. It's the perfect crime, really. And tonight, Elena continued, we're supposed to eliminate the one loose thread that could unravel everything. You. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps on the warehouse floor. Multiple sets of footsteps, moving with military precision. But these weren't the FBI backup team I'd been expecting. Assistant Director Hayes, Detective Riley, and Marcus Webb emerged from the shadows, all carrying weapons, all wearing the cold expressions of people who had crossed a line they could never come back from. I'm sorry, Jim, Detective Riley said, and she actually sounded like she meant it. But you've seen too much, know too much. We can't let you walk away from this. The beauty of it, Assistant Director Hayes added, is that your death will be blamed on the criminals you were investigating. A federal informant killed during a sting operation gone wrong. Very tragic. Very believable. I looked around the warehouse, realizing that I was completely surrounded by corrupt federal agents and the criminals they were supposed to be arresting. There was no backup coming. There was no rescue. There was just me, and the choice between fighting for my life or accepting my fate. But then I remembered something Maria Santos had told me 3 days ago, something that had seemed insignificant at the time. Jim, I made copies of everything. Everything. And I hid them somewhere very safe. I smiled, and the expression seemed to confuse everyone in the room. What's so funny? Tommy Marconi demanded. You made one mistake, I said, pulling out my phone. Just one. But it's going to cost you everything. I pressed send on a text message I'd prepared hours earlier, before I'd even known how this night would end. The message went to Maria Santos, and it contained just 2 words, execute Phoenix. Phoenix? Elena Rodriguez asked. What the hell is Phoenix? Phoenix, I replied, is what happens when you threaten a lawyer who spent 15 years learning how to fight people exactly like you. The warehouse doors exploded inward as a SWAT team poured through, followed by real federal agents. Agents who weren't on Tommy Marconi's payroll, agents who had been investigating the corruption within their own ranks for months. Maria Santos walked in behind them, wearing a bulletproof vest and the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her face. Phoenix was a contingency plan, she announced to the room. From day one, we suspected federal corruption. So we documented everything, recorded everything, and prepared for exactly this scenario. As corrupt agents and career criminals were arrested around me, I realized that sometimes the hunter, the hunted, and the hero are all the same person. Sometimes you have to walk into the trap to spring it. And sometimes, the most important victory is the one where everyone thinks you've lost, right up until the moment you reveal that you've won. The debt collection scam was over. The criminal organization was destroyed. And the corrupt federal agents who thought they were above the law learned that justice has a way of finding everyone, eventually. But the most satisfying moment came 3 months later, when I received a check from the federal government, not as payment for my cooperation, but as my share of the recovered funds from the criminal organization. The amount? Exactly $97,842.33. Sometimes, life has a sense of humor about these things.